Was the face of Rasulullah, he's asking that companion because he hasn't seen him, that man. Was the face of Prophet Muhammad like the sword? Sharp? Wanting to cut things? He said no. بل كان مثل القمر. No, he was like the moon. Now imagine a child looks at the moon. Is it like looking at a sword? Or a bomb? Or an explosive? Or a gun? Or a tank? Or a kitchen knife even? No, of course not. So he was comfortable to look at. In fact, let me tell you, brothers and sisters, that the face with no expression, with no verbal expression, was so effective and so powerful that it converted people. Think about a Jew, a rabbi. In fact, he was a rabbi, Abdullah bin Salam. Abdullah bin Salam, he said, I looked at the face of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, فعلمت أن وجهه وجه صادق وعرفت في وجهه أنه ليس بكذاب فآمنت به. Look, a rabbi, he says, I looked at the face of Rasulullah and I immediately, as a wise person who have seen millions of faces, this is not a face of a gang member. This is not a face of a serial killer. This is not a face of a child abuser. I'm saying this because there will be lots of kissing children and lots of... but what I want to say is that this is not the face of a serial killer, of a murderer, of someone who's hungry for blood. This is a face of a trustworthy person. Someone who doesn't know even how to lie, even if he wanted to lie. فَآمَنْتُ بِهِ. And I believed in him, and that was enough evidence for me to believe it. Now, this is a rabbi. Now imagine a child. Won't he smile when he look at Rasulullah? The hair of Rasulullah, and I could talk about the hair in his chest and the beard, etc. But again, I'm talking about facial expressions and the things that are appearing to the child. The child looks at the hair of Prophet Muhammad and sees a nice hair, clean hair, black hair. Even at the age of 60? Even at the age of 60. No gray hair like me, no gray hair like you, except 20 gray hairs only. And he knows why they became gray. Not because out of stress for exams, or because he had a fight with his wife, or because he lost his job, or he couldn't pay his mortgage. No. Because of Hud wa akhawatih. Shayyabatni Hud wa akhawatih. Umar al-Khattab tells him once, Ya Rasulullah, shipped. Ya Rasulullah, you became old. Yes, Ya Umar, shayyabatni Hud wa akhawatuha. There are verses in Surah Hud, فَاسْتَقِمْ كَمَا أُمِرْتَ, that made my hair grey. Why am I saying this? Because he was, to the children, not extremely old. Not a grandfather. Someone who's approachable. Someone that can play with us. Someone who can joke with us. Yet there is an element of respect. A father figure. Of course, a prophet figure. But a father. I'm trying to humanize now. I'm not trying to say that he's the messenger, he's the prophet. To a child, you cannot ration that. He receives revelation, he's the prophet. This is when you grow up a little bit. But a child in his 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, how does he see the prophet? This is what I'm interested in. Now the eyes. And you are mothers, and you are fathers, and you know the eyes and the eye contact. Now imagine if I tell you that when you wake up from your sleep, or when you sleep late, your eyes sometimes become red. Rasulullah, his eyes are extremely... There is a color contrast. The black is black, blacker than black, to quote Malcolm X, and whiter than white. And that's it. No red, no blood veins, and wide eyes. So imagine this. Imagine this wide eye, and imagine it in a context of smile. And this is the other thing. Brothers and sisters, if you have a perception of Rasulullah as always weeping and crying and shouting, this perception is wrong. Because the Sahaba, radwanullah alayhim, they say, one of them, مَا رَأَيْتُ رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إلا متبسما. I never saw Rasul sallam unless he was smiling, which means that this was the norm. The exception was when he is giving khutbah, for obvious reasons, when he is in a battle, for obvious reasons, and when he is receiving revelation, for obvious reasons. But other than that, he's smiling. In fact, there is a fascinating hadith where a child says, a child, Abdullah bin Haritha, his name, he says, ما رآني رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إلا وابتسم في وجهي. He says, whenever Rasul sallam encounters me, he smiles. Brothers and sisters, think about someone who's called Muhammad in Liverpool. Comfortable face. Whenever he sees you, he smiles. He has wide eyes. He's caring. He's loving, etc., etc. At the outset, you haven't dealt with him. He might be a bomber or anything, but you haven't dealt with them. Won't you fall in love with him? So imagine the child. I'm trying now to dramatize to make it go deep inside your head now. A child encountering all that. Now when that child grows up and talks to the tabi'een and tabi'in, will he talk like me? No. You might find I'm excited. I assure you that he was even more excited. You know why? Because Anas ibn Malik, who lived with Rasul sallam 10 years, would you imagine that he lived for 103 years? And he says, not a day passes since Rasul sallam died without me seeing him in the dream and without me crying every day when I remember his face. So you think I am excited. I am excited and I haven't seen the Prophet ﷺ. And you might be crying and you haven't seen the Prophet ﷺ. What I'm trying now to tell you is that those saw the Prophet ﷺ. And this is the kind of impact that the physical appearance of the Prophet ﷺ had on them. Now, have you ever thought about that? Before now? We looked at the physical appearance of Rasul sallam, but have we looked at that dimension? You see, brothers, this table here, I'm always used to looking at this table from this angle. Now just shift your head a little bit and go and look at it from this angle. Look at it as a woman, and look at it as a man, and look at it as a teenager, and look at it as a child. I assure you that you will get different readings than the reading of a Tirmidhi and Al-Bukhari and Ibn Kathir. And this is, I think, your active engagement in reading the text. Now imagine this eyes, smiling eyes, and imagine the lips. The lips are quite white, so when he speaks, you can't miss it. When he say, shh, you won't miss it. When he says, Anas, come, you won't miss him. Even if you are deaf, you can see the lips. And no smelling mouth. No yellow teeth. The teeth is clean. The miswak is in the pocket. And the teeth is not broken, or has bleak, or is black, or is diseased. The gums are healthy. Again, you might say, we are not dentists here. But again, believe me, brothers and sisters, this is exactly what a child will be looking at when someone speaks. And it does play a tremendous role on the child, who might not understand the rationality behind each word, but will understand in which context and how is it being articulated. And then when he talks, when he speaks very clear. He doesn't cough while he's speaking. You don't have to say to him, raise your voice or lower it. He speaks at your tone. And he tunes his voice in accordance to you. Not just voice-wise, but even content-wise. He looks at your age. He looks at your gender. He looks at your educational background. And he reacts and acts and advises accordingly. And that's why you have lots of companions asking the same question but receiving various answers according to the character of the personality. Even that advice where Rasulullah said, لا تغضب, لا تغضب, لا تغضب, don't be angry, don't be angry, don't be angry. Do you think it just came out of the blue? No, he knew the companion. He saw him when he becomes angry. He knows that he has and picks lots of fights, probably with his wife, with his children, in the mosque. The context is appropriate to the person. But as readers, we just read it from the other side. We don't take the dimension of the questioner. He speaks very visibly and very clearly, so much so that Aisha radiallahu anha says that the listener will memorize what he says. So each listener actually turns into a tape recorder because he's speaking very slowly. Not slowly to bore you or to turn you to sleep. No, slowly for you to absorb. And sometimes, as Anas ibn Malik says, he repeats what he says 3 times. Not always, but 3 times. And I can imagine that maybe he repeats 3 times for children. Maybe, because children needs repetition. We spoke about the physical. Just the physical. Now imagine with all this beauty, he touches you. He touches you on your hand, by shaking your hand. This is not for the sisters. I'm sorry to say this. Maybe you can shake hand with Aisha radiallahu anha, but not with Rasulullah sallam. He puts his hand on the cheek of the child or the head of the child. Now imagine. Imagine he does this. I want you to imagine it more strongly than that. Imagine it, and Anas ibn Malik, the child who's holding the camera, helps you to imagine. He says, I never touched something that was softer, even softer than silk, other than the hand of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وَلَا مَسَسْتُ خَزًّا وَلَا حَرِيرًا وَلَا شَيْئًا. Nothing did I ever touched in my life that was softer and tender and smoother than the hand of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And you might say this is an exaggeration, the following quotation. وَلَا شَمَمْتُ مِسْكًا قَطْ. You go to all the good stores and go to all the perfumes for women and all the perfumes for men, fragrances, etc. According to Anas, and you might call it an exaggeration, but he doesn't lie. He says, I never smelled a fragrance that was more beautiful than the sweat of Rasulullah. So I would not imagine that Rasulullah would use a deodorant. The misk is coming from his... We are talking about the Prophet ﷺ. Okay, are you with me? Are you imagining? Are you visualizing? Good. Now these are the physical appearances. What about the behavioral? Imagine he smiles, he touches, he looks at you, eye contact, he speaks to you, etc., etc. But with all that, he's merciful. He doesn't reproach you. He doesn't shout at you. He doesn't beat you up. He doesn't say to his companions, go and beat him up. He doesn't have bodyguards. You don't, when you see him, feel threatened. He doesn't have to be a policeman for you to feel that you are safe. When you see him, you feel he is safe, even without a particular uniform. This is Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now you as an adult, you will feel safe. What about children?